Hi, everyone. This video, hopefully it'll be short. I don't know. Basically, I'm just going to put out like some other information. I'm not really going to discuss the wheel solve that much because I've already put everything out there really I have to say about it. But I do have like some other odd and end things here, including hints in the thrill of the chase that I may or may not get to in this video. But I want to put just some stuff out there that anyone who's interested, you might want to look into this. For starters, I'm just going to show here. There's a ancient trail maps and stuff that have been, historically discovered. And the one thing interesting about the Bighorns, unlike the area over near Yellowstone, is it's, believe it or not, a lot less explored. There's still a lot of ancient sites that you could find here, and archaeologists constantly finding because it hasn't been developed. It's not as popular as an area as it is over in Yellowstone. It was also not explored as much. Now, in my El Jefe video, I talk about El Jefe means the boss, and by the boss, that would refer in this case probably to General Sheridan. General Sheridan he went out in 1881 and he basically followed a lot of the trails that the trappers had talked about, and the Indians, and he basically went through here and explored. And he did that in September of 1881. And one of the areas that they went is they came in, I think, from Buffalo, and they went across, and then they went up here, and then they cut across here, and I think they ended up going down, and they came out down here, and then they went around up in this area. I'll try to zoom in here. And this is where the wheel is, okay? And this whole road here, initially, this trail was based on an ancient trail. This is the actual trail that the Indians would take up to get to the wheel at the time. Now it's a road, okay? And this part up here, where it crosses Five Springs, has basically been decommissioned. This is the national forest boundary, and this is roughly right here is like roughly 2.5 miles out from the center of wheel. So this is the protected area, right? And by protected, I mean that you can go there. It's just that no development can occur. No lumberjacks can go in there and harvest anything. Now, what they ended up doing in the 60s is they built alternate 14A, which goes up this way. Okay. And then it connects over here and it bypasses this. So this is now like just a bike trail from here to over here, where it's now connects up with 651 and old 14A. So no motorized vehicles are allowed up here. But this is based, I guess I should get to explain a little bit more. The way the Indians worked is that they would follow animal trails, okay, because they were hunting, all right. Now animals normally tend to take the shortest route when they're going somewhere, and also, of course, they go near water. So initially, thousands of years ago, this would have been an animal trail, right? And eventually, of course, over time, the Indians would discover the medicine wheel, which is rumored to be anywhere from, I think, 750 years old to 7,500 based on carbon dating of wood that they found up there and pottery. So they know which tribes have been around there for a long time. I think the Lakota, the Crow, the Shoshone have been around there longer, and their ancestors prior to them were the sheep eaters. Anyway, what they did is that I guess they discovered this. This became their holy place. And although they all use the wheels differently, they do have some things in common. So they would go up to the wheel this way, and when they bought stuff up here, they did more than just go to the wheel. They would have sweat lodges. They would have sweat lodges down here, and anybody that was going up there to pray would stop on the sweat lodge, and then they would perform ceremonies there. They would kind of eat like a last supper, because when they went up to the wheel, if they went on a vision quest for 3 or 4 days, you can't eat or drink when you're up here, so you fast, kind of like Forrest and Donnie did in the book. They fasted. They ate all of their candy bars the first day, and they had nothing, to eat. They couldn't find anything to shoot. So basically, that's what he's describing here. But anyway, the Indians would bring, teepees and stuff like that, and they would carry them on horseback, and they had two poles called Travis poles that would extend from the back of the horse. And when the horse was dragging that, it would make ruts in the ground, similar to the ruts a horse-drawn wagon would make these days. And eventually, of course, when we started settling this area, the trappers followed and talked to the Indians, and the Indians explained all of these trails. This is another Indian trail here. But Sheridan, General Sheridan was on these trails. Bridger's Trail, I think, went over this side through Sheridan, and basically they discovered a lot of stuff. And when Sheridan went there, he used the logs that were generated by the mountain men because they all kept diaries, and that's how they found out about the ancient Indian trails, and they made their discoveries. So when the white man started settling out here, obviously they used the Indian trails, and they eventually started using it to truck salt down into the basin. And it then turned from an Indian trail into what they called Salt Road. And the ruts at that time were from horse-drawn carriages bringing salt across to the basin. So unfortunately, that kind of destroys the Indian Trail. The cairns, most of them are gone that marked it, and the Travis ruts were replaced with carriage ruts, and then eventually this became cars and trucks traveling on this as we got into the early 1900s, and this road was like completely unsafe. So what they ended up doing, it took them until the 60s, is they constructed a new road and then they abandoned this one. The only reason to go up this one is to get to Five Springs Campground. There's no other real reason to go here, and the road is blocked off here, and it's also blocked off down here. So the only way to get in is what's now known as Trail 140. Okay, this I got to credit to somebody. I don't know what her real name is, but she goes by the alias of Suzanne Stanners. She's been in a Facebook group for a long time, but I never seen it solved until then. And this is one of the images she puts in there. Now, you can see right here that Five Springs Creek, it's classified as warm water. And then they got other descriptions of the area here. So this is the temperature of the water, degrees Fahrenheit. It just says warm. And like I said, the water is warm in the basin where it actually forms the creek. But in the summertime, in the wintertime, of course, this whole creek freezes over. But warm is a relative term. When the water comes up out of the ground, it's warm. It's warmer until it hits the atmosphere. Then it cools off. That's why Indians consider any water that rises up from the ground warm, with the exception of geysers. Okay, this is that report from 1881 that General Sheridan made. You can find it online if you Google General Sheridan 1881 Expedition PDF. You'll find it. And in here, he basically describes in detail the trip he took. And people, of course, have read this over time, and that's how they determined the trails that he took. But anyway, I believe that the 1881 to El Jefe stuff was a hint to General Sheridan just to push you over in this general direction. Of course, it's funny that we talk about Lewis and Clark, and I don't know how many of you are aware of this, but Lewis and Clark themselves never ever explored anything in Wyoming. They never went south of Montana. The only people in their group went south, that left their group went south and explored and were the first persons to discover Yellowstone and all that. It wasn't Lewis and Clark at all. They were never anywhere near Yellowstone National Park or within the state of Wyoming, or that far south in Montana. Okay, this is something you may or may not find interesting. I went up online and I searched for the pilot licenses of Forrest Fenn and Shiloh. Here's Forrest Fenn's license, which of course he didn't renew after 2001. but this is what he was rated for, and this is when his license was first issued and his certificate as a commercial pilot. So he didn't update this after. The last time he had a medical was in August of 2001. So a lot of people are, speculating, well, Forrest never flew up here. No, of course he didn't. But you got to remember when he discusses his flight to Lander, Forrest knew where the plane was. So Forrest could have easily went to the airplane in the hangar, opened the door, put the chest in the plane and hid it in there, went back home, and then had someone else take him and Peggy up there in 2010 when they went to the Rendezvous Royale in September of 2010. We have video of that. And he could have easily, while they were busy, went back to the airport with the rental car and took the chest out of the plane without whoever took him there knowing that it was ever there to begin with. And then he could go off and hide it and then be back and nobody would know a darn thing. So, who is the other person that might have taken him up there? One of them is right here, Forrest's grandson, Forrest's daughter, Zoe Old's son, Sheila, Forrest Old. The last time he had a medical was 2017. His pilot license is still active and he's licensed as a private pilot. Airplane, single engine. Okay. So his license was valid in 2017. And we have pictures of Forrest in Wyoming from 2010. We know he was also there in 2006, although in that video he says he drove up there. But the point is, Sheila could have flown him up there without even knowing that he took the chest there. And I believe that's probably how him and Peggy got there. I don't think Forrest would put Peggy through that long drive in 2010. He would just ask Sheila, hey, take us up there. Let's go spend a week, at the Rendezvous Royale on Cody. And they go up there, they go to the hotel. Forrest skips out one day. Yeah, I'm going to go talk to some friends of mine. And then he drives to the airport, goes to the plane, opens it up, takes the treasure out, puts it in the trunk, goes and hides it, and comes back later in the afternoon. Nobody knows anything. Okay, some of you may have seen this picture before. This was I think it's ceramic. I don't know. It was cast by a company called Rockwood, and that company is in, I think, Philadelphia. All right, and this is a crow, and this belonged to Joseph Henry Sharp. Forrest Fenn owns it, and right now it appears inside the cabin, which is where Joseph Henry Sharp kept it. So it's in the Cody Museum in there, and it's usually on top of a Rockwood piece of furniture that was also made by a company that was in Philly. And if you read the history behind this, at the museum, I think I found it. Joseph Henry Sharp liked this piece because it reminded him of two things. One, it reminded him of all the Crow Indians that he painted and loved. Two, it reminded him of his home in Philadelphia, both places that he missed. I'm guessing here that this is a crow in the moon. These trees that stumps represent the lumber industry, and the crow, of course, are members of the Wheel Alliance and the Wheel Coalition. This is in the end of the Thrill of the Chase. It's also in the spot where Forrest mentions that his father and mother, they're buried in row 4, block 23 in Texas. Well, the home of Brown, or Medicine Mountain, and the parking lot at the Wheel is also within row 4, block 23. And the picture in there kind of discusses what was happening back when Forrest got cancer, all the way up until they resolved it in courts. And that took, all the way until 2004. And actually, they re expanded it again in 2011. This one's kind of funny. This isn't from me. Somebody sent this to me in an email. And I guess they noticed that if you look at this shape here, okay, it kind of looks like the frog. I don't know. So what they did is they put the frog on top of that image that was in my video, and they were trying to indicate to me that it looks like it matches it. The gold frog that's in the Thrill of the Chase is actually shaped like this area. This image is just here for completeness so that you know how I arrived at where I did and followed the poem. And when the poem says, look quickly down, he's telling you to look along where the sun is shining. The only two currents that matter are the N, the E and D. The E and D is ever drawing nigh. And the D is pointing towards where warm water salt, if you take the center of the wheel hub. Because when he says try the wheel, he's telling you to use the wheel. So if you draw out from the center, it's where warm water salt. You can also draw it out from here, and it's the same thing. It would actually, it's even better because not only does it go to the basin, it crosses over the bench or banco, however you pronounce it, area where Francis Brown, Hammond Wise, and Charles Brady are, and then it proceeds right up to the peak of Medicine Mountain. That's the line of sight if you look this way. And then, of course, the sunrise, you'd be standing here and looking that way. But when he says the end is all dry nigh, there'll be no popular creatures, heavy loads, and water high, he's talking about these two things. And then he says, if you've been wise and found the blaze, look quickly down, your quest will cease. He's telling you to look down where the sun is shining light. And if you follow this line, as you already know, it takes you right down past that spot that I discussed in the solve. It flies right over Five Springs Campground. It crosses over the intersection of the ancient trail that we've been talking about. And then it goes right over here to Rainbow Canyon. Like I said in the other video, my solve, I'm agreeing with Sam. I think it was more likely here. But honestly, I still have some thoughts that it was down here. I just can't shake that area. Because to me, when he says not far, but too far to walk, he's telling you that the place that you're going to is near, but it's too far to walk. And just like we chose the second letter in the poem, we take what we learn, and when we leave the wheel, okay, we're not going to take the first place that we can walk into. We're going to keep going down and take the second place that we can walk to that leads to that creek and leads to heavy loads and water high, which is the waterfalls and the rock slide area down here. Because a basin or a tub or a sink is where warm water salts. You'll find the headwaters. So everything is themed after Five Springs. We've got Five Springs Basin, Five Springs Creek, Five Springs Canyon, Five Springs Campground, which is where you go to Tyree Scant and Marvel Gaze. You go there when you're tired, weak and tired. When he says your creek, he already got done talking about beginning where warm water salt, which you know is Five Springs Basin, and taking in the canyon down, which is Five Springs Canyon. So obviously, the obvious creek that would be your creek would be Five Springs Creek. There's no other creek that's down here, down south below the wheel, and also below elevation in both places. Anyhow, I just wanted to put this out there for you to be able to refer to. You can get a screenshot of it, whatever you want. Something else I want to talk about, and I'm not going to explain any of this because I already did. There are some things that I was still looking at in the poem that I never resolved that may give us even more precision, and I want to run those by you in case you see something that I don't, or what have you. One of the things that I want to point out here, and I don't know if you guys could find any connection, I didn't, but he's basically sending us to a place that we are able to walk. He's telling you right here, basically go to a place to walk, okay? And that place is not far, but we're going to have to drive there, basically, in a nutshell. It's not far, but it's too far to walk. So don't go to that means that the place is near, but it can also mean don't go to the closest spot you could walk from. Go to the place that you have to drive to that you can walk from. Okay. So in other words, the second choice, which as you know, we always chose the second letter up here. Now, if you're walking and we're sliding everything over, this gap to the first letter from where it started would be the number of steps that you took to slide that line over. Okay. So we have the number of steps we took here, number of steps we took here. The number of steps we took here would be negative. -5, and then the number of steps here, the number of steps here, the number of steps here. And of course, you can continue that down. I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but I can tell you that in SamSolve, we use that information because if Sam was going from D to E and past that fence, right? If you count the number of steps in here and you figure that each one of those steps is going to be the length of the average human stride, that would work out to roughly 2.5 feet per step. And if you multiplied that out, it actually led directly to where Sam's spot was. I mean, to the T. Or you could treat that as yards, and then you would divide it by 2.5. Either way, it worked out to that. Now, that may have been a coincidence. Sam and I never really agreed upon that definitively because Sam and I both believed that in order for Fenn to pull this off was hard enough. And here that is. This is from there. Okay, we slid that line over 22 columns. We slid over this line 26, -5, 17, 13, 9, and 7, and 14 up to the time where we take the chest. And then this is the lines that we did from so why 43, 16, 37, 34. Maybe somehow you sum them up and they'll have some kind of a meaning. I don't know. But that's that. Yeah, 233 steps. At 2.5 steps per foot, it equals 582.5 feet. Or you could divide 233 by 3, which is 77.6 yards. That could be a hint that when you get down to the intersection of where the sun intersects the path, it's going to be exactly roughly 77 yards downstream or upstream, depending on how you want to look at it, right? I don't know. That's up for you guys to decide. You can take a look at that. This stuff here is just that's the solve right there. That's that's the entire solve. Like Jack said, it's very very straightforward. Now, yeah, it's very straightforward now that we figured out that this is the place where warm waters halt. But anyway, let's say that you were out browsing the internet like Jack, and you noticed the wheel, and you noticed some people made connections to it, and you decided that that might be a good, hunt to look at. It happened to be a very popular discussion in 2018. So you're going to look at it, and then you don't know anything about how try the wheel works. So you just avoid that. You're like, that's too complicated. When it really isn't. It's just that you weren't reading the poem properly. The way I explain sliding the lines to me is very straightforward, but we can ignore that fact and just read it. Imagine that you went to the wheel and you found, I mean, you just literally, what is the closest stream that's down and below? A place that where warmer salt. It would be Five Springs Basin. It's plural. It's more than one body of water that forms a creek right in its name, and a tub, sink, or a basin is where warm water salt. So straightforward, where warmer salt, Five Springs Basin. Well, what will be the logical canyon that's down below the wheel and downstream from Five Springs Basin? It would be Five Springs Canyon, obviously, right? Not far, but too far to walk. He's telling you that to get into the canyon from where warm water salt, it's going to be near. So he's reinforcing the fact that it's right below, but you're going to have to drive to the point where you walk. Now, it would obviously be your creek here. He doesn't have to mention the name of the creek because if we're going with Five Springs Basin and we're going with Five Springs Canyon, your creek is going to be a reference to Five Springs Creek. That's the context that we have. It doesn't make sense to be anywhere else. And if you look at the wheel, you'll quickly discover that the home of Brown is going to be Medicine Mountain. It's described right on site, the spiritual home of 81 tribes. And when you're looking down from there, you're looking at the crossroads. It's actually described as that crossroads of culture. It says that the trail that you're standing on is ancient, and it was crossed by up to 81 tribes heading up to the wheel. So the home of Brown is obviously Medicine Mountain. That's where they were headed to. This isn't rocket science, right? And then again, from there, the NW draw 9, battle heavy loads and water high. He's just telling you what to do. And all right, how do we know? Even again, down when we get to the rest of the poem with so, where he's confirming everything, he's telling you the decairn, because the decairn is the only one that points to the basin, and it's the only one that represents water. It represents the southern fish that's sitting below the water bear, which is Aquarius. Now, if he's talking about a blaze, the obvious blaze at the wheel is going to be the solstice sunrise. And then he tells you to look quickly down. He's telling you, look down where the light shines. And the first canyon that line is going to enter is Five Springs Canyon. And then it goes to Rainbow Canyon, which is the end of the canyon, right? So it's extremely straightforward. There's no bias here. And like he said, the solution's not going to be direct, it's indirect. And he also said that the hints in the book are not there to aid the searcher, which means that they're all going to be indirect. It's not going to be a place that he named. So right there, he's ruling out Yellowstone. He's ruling out any place that he named. The Mountain Man Eye goes with the theme. And here's another thing. Forrest also said where the lines cross. Well, take a look, once again at Dr. Eddie's diagram. Where are the lines crossing? They're crossing in the center of the wheel. He's telling you right on site to essentially do what the wheel's doing. Try the wheel, draw lines out from the wheel. Here's where warm water salt, or here, whatever. Either way is fine. They're both going to lead to the basin. And it doesn't matter how far you draw them, because you're drawing them far enough so that the place that you're going to is near. It's the nearest place, but it's too far to walk to because it's so far down below you. So he's telling you everything you need to know. And then he's telling you the end is ever drawing nigh. Well, the sun rises and it's always drawing nigh. It's always heading towards the end of the day. So, like I said, the temperature is warm in Five Spring Basin. It's documented. Here's another one. Forrest talking about the Rosetta Stone. If you read that chapter, he says some may be on land owned by American people, but tended to by the Bureau of Land Management. So he's giving you a hint here as the type of land that the treasure's on. And also up at the wheel, there's a stone that shows the wheel carved in it. And the stone is thousands of years old. So I picked up as a hint as to the wheel again when he's talking about the Rosetta Stone. Another hint, and remember, these are all indirect. If you read the whole book, Forrest thinks that Eric Sloane was clever. I wish I could have thought of that idea. And then he talks about his mother. He talks about his father. He talks about people that were always around to provide words of wisdom to him, especially whenever something troubling came up in his life. In other words, whenever his warm waters halted, his father was always there to give him advice. He even refers to his father as a god, calling him Thor. Okay, so whenever that happens, he always seems to get advice from somebody that's wiser or older than him. And then he even talks about kids coming back, where his father put them on the right path. So he learned by experience, and learning by experience is wisdom. You can't gain wisdom by reading a book. You can only gain it by experiencing something. So how does that relate to the wheel? Well, after you go to the wheel to get their life back on the straight and narrow, they go there to pray and see what's likely to happen in their future. After they go up there, if you look at the last stanza, so hear me all and listen good, your effort will be worth your cold. After they're done spending 4 days up there, starving and freezing, they come back down to a lower elevation, and they talk to an elder or a medicine man. And the medicine man tells them what their experience meant and how it's going to impact their future. This is exactly what Forrest Fenn's dad did, and the same thing that happened in the Rockwell pictures that he copied from. He's learning, and he's gaining street smarts and so on and so forth by an elder. Right? This is exactly, again, like I said, a reference to what happens at the wheel. And this is not special knowledge because all of this is documented. So that would take care of these two. And again, Forrest in the book, many of the chapters, and remember the hints are indirect. He's always at a crossroads, and he even talks about crossroads in My War for Me, where he's talking about him and Peggy. Whenever they were at a fork or crossroads of life, they always made the right choice. All right, that is what represents Five Springs area. It's identified as the crossroads of culture. That's where many tribes would meet each other. It was an area of peace. So even if there weren't tribes, they would still talk with each other and work things out. So anyway, like I said, I don't know if there's anything that you guys that want to take it farther can get from this. Um, if you do, that's cool. Now I want to show you something else here before I get into this part, because this might help some of you guys too. And it's not speculation. Um, it was confidential, but Forrest Fenn has passed away now, so I'm going to show it to you. Also, it doesn't really. He's not talking about a solution here. My main question for him was not related to a solve. He was congratulating me on different research. Okay. And I'll show you that research now. But basically, you can look at the dates, times, and all of that. And he replied to me, Troy, you did a lot of research on that subject. Congratulations. And then he says, some of your assumptions are faulty. Each pilot gets intelligence briefing before every combat mission and a debriefing afterwards. So we are generally aware of some of the things you mentioned. And then he corrects me on how I was pronouncing Toy Wall. It's not Toy Hoa, it's Toy Wall. What I'm basically asking down here is I right up told him, I said, Forrest, I don't believe that you ever went to any waterfall because, and I'll show you right now what I mean. Mangang Pass is where he would have went. And that was what he congratulated me on because I discovered exactly what he was talking about. And I was right about burying people in the standing position. Pretty much everything I had discovered was right on. So the waterfall that he found was up at Mangang Pass. That's what he was congratulating me on, not a solution or nothing like that. So I want to make that perfectly clear before people start speculating. Now, Toy Hall or Toy Wall is here. Forest Base was right here. And I just want to point out right here, there was an army base. And they used to refer to it as the golf course. It was Camp Radcliffe. All right. This, and I'm going to butcher these names, Koi Non, that's straight north of Toy Hall. This is where the Navy came in. The Navy would come in here and they would bring supplies up along this road called QL 19, and they would hit Mangang Pass here. They would go through the pass and they would bring it over to here. Okay. Now, during the French Indochina War, the French were based here, and there was heavy battle going on here at another pass. And the French, of course, marched across here. They went and fought the battle in the 50s, and then they were called to pull back, retreat. So they started retreating back along this road, and they were ambushed up around here, Global Moop 100, and they wiped out 1,600 Frenchmen. Those Frenchmen were buried up along the mountains here in Mangang Pass. They were buried in a standing position facing west. Eventually, they filled the graves in with lye or lime. You can see that when you go in Google Earth and zoom in. Unfortunately, you can't get that good a resolution because this is Vietnam that we're talking about. This is Vietnam, so they're not going to give you high resolution. But anyway, they're all buried up in here. They never made it back. They never made it back home. They were wiped out here. Now, a lot of the graves have been dug up, and after years later, because the French, after they were ambushed, they surrendered the Indochina War the very next day. So all the men were some of them were actually buried down here along the road. So that is exactly where Forrest Fenn was talking about. That is exactly what he was congratulating me on, not a solution. But while we're here, let's look at this light blue line. This is the 109th longitude line, but this is on the east. 109 east, okay? Not west, 109 east. If you take Toy Wall and you find out the exact longitude and latitude of that area, and then you go across to now before you do this, remember what I'm doing here and look at the angle of this. Look at the length of it. That's the helicopter ride they took. The helicopter probably came out of this base because he said it was an army friend. Flew down, flew Forrest up here, flew Forrest back home, and then went back. It would have enough to do that with a full tank of fuel. It couldn't go much further past this location. And again, that's what Forrest was congratulating me on. But look at the angle here. This angle from this. Now remember, this is 109 east. This is 109 west. And not just 109. I mean, you could take the actual degrees, minutes, and seconds right down to the fraction. And Kerwin is exactly on that same longitude line that Toivoa is on. All right. Now, the difference in latitude from Vietnam and Kerwin is 32 degrees difference, which is the freezing point of water. His base in Vietnam is down at 12, 13 latitude. It's closer to the equator. Up here, we're at 40, near 45. So yeah, 32 degrees would take you up to here, right? So basically, this would be where he was based. And a lot of the stories he tells in the book are over in Yellowstone. Now, remember, that line is going west that I had in Vietnam. So if you take those flights, it flies right over the waterfalls, Upper Falls, where Skippy was, goes to Grebe Lake. It goes all up to those interesting areas, right? That Forrest discusses in all of his videos. But remember, his hints are never direct. Well, over here, when we found this line, you could subtract it. You could swap east and west because it's the exact same line of longitude. But when you're calculating a trip that somebody took, we got to measure that trip, and it was roughly 94 miles. He said just under 100 miles, and it took him roughly an hour. Okay, and he said that the waterfall was under his left wing. He gave, and it was at 11 o'clock, and I mean, he gave you roughly enough information to figure out the angle and hone in on Mang Yang Pass if you do enough research on Vietnam. And by the way, that QL-19 road that was ambushed, in 1968, it was ambushed again. And Forrest actually had to go there to do missions because that became a hotbed once again, like I talk about in my video. We became complacent, and Americans almost died in the exact same spot as the French due to that complacency. Very, very interesting, right? So I challenged Forrest. I said, there's no way that you would have had the guts to go and get your army buddy to bring a helicopter and go and land right smack in the middle of where there was a battle. So I said that whole story was made up. And the only reason why it was made up is to give us hints over to Wyoming. And you notice how in that email he says, some of the things you say were wrong. He didn't say I was wrong about that. He just said I spelled it wrong. And I was wrong about the fact that he had security briefings. Of course he had security briefings, but that doesn't mean he would have went there. I mean, really, are you going to take a chance and fly right into enemy territory to just go visit a waterfall? No. So what I do in that video that Forrest didn't comment on is I discovered that if you take that trip, now remember, we mirrored east and west to get here. So let's mirror that vector. So if he made a trip here at whatever degrees that was, let's mirror that across the 109 and let's follow it out 95 miles, roughly, the same distance he traveled over there. And it takes you right to the medicine wheel, right over a road known as Medicine Mountain Passage, which is the same thing as Mang Yang Pass. It's a passage, okay? It's the same place. So he flew right over here, and there's a waterfall here. There's another hint. And he said that they were above. Well, basically, he would have landed up on the wheel and then he would throw rocks down into a waterfall into the creek from high above. He didn't say he went down there. He said he threw rocks down there, and then he said he got up and he was tripping over a blaze. That was just another hint again. And to me, that was a hint of the Cross of Lorraine. You can look that up. It's the French cross for military, and it's got two arms, which is exactly like the cross that we revealed in the poem. So yeah, this is a stone version of what he would have knocked over. This is from Vietnam. This is from Mang Yang Pass, or actually, this might be along QL19. No, this marks the location of Mang Yang Pass on QL19, where Group Mobile was ambushed. This one side is in Vietnamese and the other side is in French. There's nothing English on here at all. But they also had aluminum grave markers if you read about this. So Forrest was basically just hinting to the bighorns. All you had to do was mirror this story. So again, like I show in that other video, if this was Toy Hall down here, okay, actually it would probably be somewhere around here. And then if this was the border of Wyoming and Montana, the difference would be 32 degrees up, okay, to 45. If this was the 109, it goes up to the North Pole. This is 109 west, and then it comes down as 109 east. So you're reflecting it over to the other side of the earth when you get to west. And then, of course, we're adding 32 degrees, the freezing point of water, warm water halting, to get up to 45. So that stuff was all hints to Kerwin, but he wasn't trying to tell you the chest was in Kerwin. I think what he was trying to do was tell you, look at the trip that he described in detail in My War for Me, and take that trip but mirror it over to Wyoming. As simple as that, you know. But anyway, this stuff's out there for you all. I don't need to talk about it anymore. Maybe you'll find more. If you do, let me know. And have a good day. That's really all I had to say. I just wanted to put this out there. I may go through the thrill of the chase and show you more of the hints, but there's a problem with that. That video would probably take hours because I'm not kidding. There's so many hints that lead to the Bighorn Mountains. They don't lead to the wheel, all of them. They lead to places around the wheel. They lead to Sheridan. They lead to Meadowlark Lake. They lead to Buffalo, where the carousel was, the horse from a carousel. That's the whole thing with Catcher in the Rye. And then they lead to the cabin that Hemingway stayed at when he wrote A Farewell to Arms and the Bighorns. And they lead to Joseph Henry Sharp takes you to just north of the Bighorns, up along the Bighorn River where his cabin was. He talks about the Custer Battle. All of that stuff is references to the Crow Indians. All of that stuff is bringing you to that side of Wyoming. But it would be too much to list, so I'm probably not going to do that. I don't know. But depending on what kind of feedback I get in this, if you guys have any questions, maybe I'll do a follow-up. So anyway, have a good rest of your weekend. Peace.